Hello. Oh, look at the hair on my face. Jax West from Justice with Jax, Stephen Avery Project, MAM Gossip. And I am live today to talk about the Marni Yang case. I'm actually in the middle of writing up my recap from the 3 days that we have been in court. Um, Here's some pages. I've so far written up 5 pages of it, and I have 13 pages total that I took while in court. So as soon as I get that whole thing done, um, I will get that posted so you can read everything I have to say about what happened in court for these last 3 days. For those of you that don't know the Marni Yang case, this is a case from Lake County, Illinois, known as the wrongful conviction capital. Hello, Christopher. Um, Two of the cases that I work on are both from Lake County. So there's Marni Yang from this case. Oh, and there's Marni. This is another picture from one of the days that I visited her. Stephen. Oh, another picture of Marni when I visited. And then here's Melissa Kaluzinski. Can you tell I visit Melissa a lot? Melissa Kaluzinski. Okay. So both Marni and Melissa's cases come out of Lake County, and they have a lot of the same players from the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force. So Marni was just a single mother of 3 kids who the children's father had abandoned the family. And so it was Marni Yang supporting these 3 kids all on her own with no help from the father. She was a big football fan. Her son, Andrew, so her oldest kids, Andrew and Emily, were twins. And so she was a football mom. And she went to a football convention and she met Sean Gale. And for those of you either not here from the Chicago area or don't follow football, Sean Gale is from the Super Bowl 1985 Chicago, the Bears. So here in Illinois, those Super Bowl shuffle Bears are like gods here. And I will say that I personally, everyone may not think this, but I also found Sean Gale at the time, and I used to be big into football and followed the Bears. I I stayed with them after Ditka left, and our coach was Wanstedt, and I ended up losing interest, and I don't follow football anymore. But I did think Sean Gale was cute. So Sean Gale was a ladies' man, and he and Marni began a relationship of sorts, um, where I don't even know if you would call it dating. I don't know if any woman could truly say that they were dating Sean Gale. Um, you're more of like a hookup to him. Oh, Melissa Kaluzinski just texted me. Um, because he didn't do anything for you. Like if you went somewhere with him, you paid your own way. And at the time of this crime occurring, Sean Gale had 17 girlfriends, if you call them that, of which, sadly, the victim, Ronnie Ryder, was one of them. And Ronnie was just this woman from Wisconsin. You know, the Chicago Bears have a practice facility or whatever you want to call it that's in Wisconsin. And so Ronnie was somebody who hung out at um, that uh, um, field or whatever you call it. And she actually had relationships with several different Chicago Bears. But Sean Gale is the one that she stuck with, and she actually followed him and moved to Illinois to follow Sean Gale. They did not live together, and um, to get into their relationship some, Sean did not want to ever be married. He did not want children. Ronnie Ryder wanted children. She did get pregnant, assumed by Sean a couple of times, and he paid for her to have abortions. And when she got pregnant this last time, she didn't tell Sean about it until after she got to where past that date where now you can no longer have an abortion, because Ronnie was in her 30s and saw it as, you know, one of her last opportunities to have a child. So, um, Ronnie really wanted to be a mother. And she did want a relationship to last with Sean Gale. Um, he just at that time was not a relationship guy. He was hooking up with any woman who wanted to hook up with him. So Ronnie was one of those, and so was Marni Yang. So Marni also did real estate. And she and Sean Gale were did some real estate transactions together as well. So sadly, Ronnie Ryder one day was leaving her condo, and someone was waiting outside the door in the hallway of her condo building and shot the poor woman. I believe she was 8 months pregnant at the time. And um, she was killed. Eventually, I don't even know if you would say that Marni Yang became a suspect first. I can't recall if Marni was suspect first, but they went after her 16-year-old son, Andrew. Um I am not you know, we would be here all day if I started covering everything that's involved in this case. There is a website, freemarniyang.com, and you can go there and read more stuff about this case. I do have a YouTube channel, the Justice with Jax YouTube, where there is a folder, whatever you call it, over there on YouTube, that are different videos when I have covered Marni's case in the past. So you can go read that. But because of, you know, these 3 days for this evidentiary hearing was a lot, and I'm halfway done typing that up, and I still have to type the rest of that up. Let me just, instead of deep diving into the case, let's just talk about this evidentiary hearing. Okay. So, and something that I had just written up too, that the judge kept said multiple times over these last 3 days is this evidentiary hearing is supposed to only cover five things. These are things that has been argued on what the judge is allowing and what the judge is not. And these five things are the things that Judge Stride said could be discussed in a stage 3 evidentiary hearing. And he didn't want to hear anything on anything else. And one of the many sucky things about our judicial system is you have to show new evidence to get back into court. And it has to be something. Thank you, Christopher, for posting the YouTube link. So you have to try and show something that was not in the original trial to get that case back into court. And I just really call bullshit on that, because I can look at something and say, this is white. But then I can look at it further and go, oh wait, it's white and red. And then I can look at it further and go, wait, it's white and red and yellow. You know what I mean? So you can look at something that's factual and say something factual about it, but upon further examination, you're going to notice something else about it. So I really don't like that it has to be something completely new to get it back into court. Our system sucks. But so the five things, let me see if I can find in my notes. My notes are very hard for me to read. But all right, so the five things are the DNA that are on the live rounds, the medical alert bracelet, Jesse Delgado and Stephen Wade's affidavits, and actual innocence by the defendant. So, Ronnie Ryder was shot. Oh my gosh. Now, if you follow me, you know I'm really bad with numbers. And it'll be in my notes. I don't know if I want to say she was shot 7 times. But then also 5 live rounds were also found on the floor of her kitchen. So, and I've done videos on this in the past, because the actual gun that they're claiming was used in this instance, my husband is a big gun enthusiast. So he has the same gun. And so I've done things in the past with that gun. I've done things like I had Marni draw on a piece of paper on one of my visits with her that I wanted her to show, because Marni is a teeny tiny little thing. And so I wanted to show the size of her hand, because see, you put her hand next to my hand, look at where her fingertips go to my fingertips. And so I've done demonstrations before of me holding that gun and how my hands fit on that gun. And then you have to picture this little hand. There, I have to put it like that. This little hand on the gun. And so imagine that you're, I don't know if you would say lying in wait, standing in wait in the hallway, waiting for this woman to open her door, because for however you know she is going to be leaving from that door that morning. And so you're waiting there. And she opens that door and you start shooting. The shooter wasn't there for a long period of time. There is a 911 call of somebody who lived below Ronnie Ryder that they called 911 immediately and said they heard a pop pop, and you can find that and listen to that call for yourself. So this is something that happened very fast. And so while you're shooting somebody on a weekday in the morning in a condo. This isn't a house. This is, like an apartment building where you don't know if somebody else is going to walk out of a doorway, so you're doing this really fast and on the run. So while you're shooting 7 or 8 times, it is assumed the gun is also jamming. And you have to clear that jam and eject that live round that falls on the floor. So not only are you so you have to pow. Oh, now I have to clear something. I mean, it's I I don't know how somebody Marnie's size would be able to do all of that. But anyway, I digress. So there's DNA that are on those live rounds. Oh, hi, Paul Kaluzinski. Melissa just texted me while I was on here. And now there's and now there's Larry emailing me. Um Marnie's dad. Okay, so there's DNA on those live rounds. So that's number one that could be discussed at this evidentiary hearing. Number two is a medic alert bracelet, which they didn't really get into. Um, so, and I don't even remember the full story on this medical alert bracelet and how it came to be. But from me being involved in the case, I'm just going to tell you what I recall of this medic alert bracelet. This thing is ugly and fakey fake looking. So it was like this weird pearl, like pearls with medical alert bracelet. And this was, I believe it was just to say that that Ronnie Ryder was pregnant, allegedly. But people who were friends with Ronnie, nobody ever recalls her having this bracelet. And now remember, too, that this woman had been hiding her pregnancy for months because Sean Gale had previously made her have abortions. So she, is not out advertising her pregnancy. And so there's this medic alert bracelet that nobody can prove that Ronnie Ryder even had, but I think it was like 2 years after the crime, it was found buried in an empty lot. And they're claiming that was the bracelet. So that is one of the things that the judge has approved discussion on. Then you've got the affidavits of Jesse Delgado and Stephen Wade. So Jesse Delgado was a friend of Andrew Yang's, Marnie's oldest son. No Paul Foreman, Paul Kaluzinski. No, Paul Foreman wasn't even mentioned at Marnie's hearing in any way, shape, or form. They only talked about Manny Montez, whatever you call that guy. So Jesse Delgado, a friend of Andrew's, and they didn't go too much into Jesse Delgado, so I'm just going to tell you what I know of him. And so Jesse Delgado stole some things from Marnie's house. Marnie's house was like the hangout spot. No, Paul, I don't know if you heard me before. Paul Foreman did not testify. So neighborhood kids, all the kids' friends would hang out at Marnie's house. And Jesse Delgado stole several things from the house. Marni was a scuba diver, so she had a scuba camera, and that was stolen. There was, I want to say it was a PlayStation was stolen, so some kind of gaming system was stolen. And then there was a gun that was stolen. So Jesse Delgado stole those things, and when Lake County was targeting the Yang family, I mean, they did things like they went to Andrews High School to go in there and question people, question kids, and said that Andrew is a murderer. I mean, they tormented these children. Um, so when they got to Jesse Delgado, now this wasn't said in court, but Jesse Delgado assumed, because they started targeting the Yang family well after this case had happened. So he thought when they were coming to question him that it was going to be he's getting busted, that he stole stuff from the Yang house. And so he started saying, "Oh, you're here about the stuff I took?" And the cops like, "These aren't the droids you're looking for. No, I don't want to hear it. We're not here to talk about that." So there is an affidavit from Jesse Delgado talking about that he stole the gun. So that's Jesse Delgado. Stephen Wade is somebody who worked at the barber shop that the day of the murder, Sean Gale showed up at that barber shop. So, um, Stephen Wade was an unlicensed barber at this barber shop. This is the spot. So, in the black community, barber shops are a hangout, and black men get their hair cut, or white men may too, but I'm just saying in this instance, you know, um, they could go weekly, and this is where now uh, men might not like how I'm describing this, but you they're gossiping. It's the hangout. You're gossiping. You're talking about whatever. I mean, have you ever seen the barbershop movies? I love those movies, by the way. So this particular barbershop on the north side of Chicago was like where the Chicago Bulls would go to get their hair did, and the Bears. This was the place. And so Sean Gale was a frequent customer there. And on the day that Ronnie Ryder was killed, Stephen Wade was there, and Sean Gale walked in, and we did watch a video of Stephen Wade being interrogated by the state's attorney's office a couple of years ago. So this is their own interrogation of him that was submitted into evidence in this hearing. So they had their opportunity to question him, but whatever. So what Stephen Wade says in that video is that Sean Gale usually came in the afternoon, but on this day he came in the morning. That wasn't typical. And that Sean Gale was usually very well put together, in nice clothes and looked all nice. And he said on this day, the guy was disheveled and sweaty. And I can't recall what the word was that he used. I want to say like fidgety. Um, it'll be in the thing that I'm typing up, because I know I had just had it and just had talked about it. But so anyway, Um, so he wasn't himself. He said he had also, while he was standing, had picked up a magazine, and then was like flipping through it, but never, not even really looking at it. So it was kind of a nervous, anxious thing that he was doing with the magazine. And so then at one point in the middle of the barbershop, and the state had him draw a diagram of what the barbershop looked like and where people had been standing and where the chairs were and, all that kind of stuff. But he said at one point, then Sean Gale says, and it's in my notes somewhere, so I don't recall what the exact words are, but it's something to the effect, Sean Gale says, "It's done, she's gone." And the owner of the barber shop, Leroy, um said, let's go to the office. Took him to a back office. And then when they were in that back office, Stephen Wade said you could hear Leroy yell at Sean Gale and said, "You need to get your shit together." And they weren't in the office for very long. They then came out of the office, and that's when Leroy told all the employees that you all need to go before the cops come. And so everybody gets the day off. Everybody go. And um, Sean Gale then sits in Leroy's chair wanting his haircut. And the shop phone rings, and Sean Gale's cell phone is also going off. And so, and the person who's calling the shop phone also wants to talk to Sean Gale. I don't know why they would know he's there, but whatever. And it one of the things Sean Gale was heard saying into the phone was she found in a pool of blood. So he knows, allegedly, knows nothing of what's happening or what has happened, but he asks if she was found in a pool of blood. That's very odd to me. So, Stephen Wade's affidavit is one of the 5 things. And the final thing is the defendant, Marni Yang's actual assertion that she is, her assertion that she is actually innocent. So the judge really wanted to stick to those 5 things. There were a couple of times that people tried to go beyond that scope, but the judge kept trying to rein it back in to those 5 things. Our first day, so we start off with Jed being able to present the new evidence. And so the first person he has on the stand is Art Borchers, and he was from Larson Forensic something or another. So the ballistics experts. Um, so I will have, in this thing that I have been writing up, you will have every last detail. But like I said, I am just trying to keep this short on what went on in court. So from John Larson and Art Borchers investigating. And this was the big thing for me when I first got brought into this case, and I was asked to sit in at Attorney Jed Stone's office when all the different experts for Marni's side were there, and everybody was presenting what it is that they've discovered or learned on the case. the biggest thing for me was John Larson and Art Borchers and this foam mannequin that they had, which, oh my gosh, the state and the state's expert really tried to rip on this foam mannequin, and they wanted to keep calling it a dummy to try and make it sound even worse. But this was cut into the relative size of the victim. Okay? Is it going to be exact? No. So the main thing from this is where the bullet wounds are, allegedly, because you're going off of the forensic report, which that's Dr. Manny Montez and Paul Kaluzinski can tell you too, that and they get into it in this case on nobody should be taking anything Manny Montez says as factual. He is not even board certified. He did not even take the certification to get board certified. And in the Melissa Kaluzinski case, which was a poor toddler died, this man claimed that he felt with his hands a fracture in the boy's skull. And Melissa's defense team was given an x-ray of that boy's skull, but it was done with this software, blah, 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 that you can't open. So it was like blacked out and you couldn't really see what it is. And it isn't until years later when you get a real coroner there, Dr. Rudd, who is able to see what that x-ray really looked like. And that boy's head looked like a giant light bulb. And then you also have Paul Foreman that Paul Kaluzinski was bringing up. So what was Foreman's title? Is he like deputy coroner or something like that? So Paul Foreman was somebody who's actually there during Benjamin Kingan autopsy, and he said that Manny Montez was never even in the room with the victim. So not only is there no fracture that this man can't, so he claims he felt it with his own hands and there's no fracture there. He's never even in the room when an autopsy is done on this child. So this is the same forensic expert, coroner, whatever, that the Marni Yang legal team has to go off of the victim's autopsy on. So she shot here, and so when you do the autopsy, you're measuring everything, so it is this many inches from this, blah 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 blah. So that is what Larson and Borchers are recreating with this foam dummy. It is, as I said, it is not an exact replica of the victim. But knowing from the report, she's shot here and the bullet travels down and it goes out her body and then goes into her arm and out the other side of her arm, and it's going in a downward trajectory. Period. And so when I looked at that foam dummy and saw the rod put in there and how that shot had to have gone through the body, then knowing that Ronnie Ryder was 5 feet 9 inches tall and Marni at that time was 5 feet tall. Where's the picture of me and Marni? Okay. I am 5'7". So I am 2 inches shorter than Ronnie Ryder. And Ronnie, from the evidence, from science, they know that the shooter was 1 to 3 inches away, or the gun was 1 to 3 inches away from Ronnie Ryder because of the way the holes are in her body and what is on her clothing. Um, so the person had to be 1 to 3, no more than 6 inches, or the gun had to be. So little old Marnie, look at where her shoulders are. And if you're holding a gun straight out, if she was to hold straight from her shoulders, she's at my boobs. um, so how is she going to shoot me up here going downward? And I am 2 inches shorter than Ronnie Ryder, possibly 3. Wait, I always said I was 5'7". Last time I went to the doctor, they said I'm 5'6". Um, but anyway, so I'm shorter, and she can't shoot me in that spot. Period. So, and I've been sharing on this page the different press articles on the case, and I went in one and I went into the comments, and of all the cases that I advocate for, so there's Melissa Kaluzinski, Stephen Avery / Brendan Dassey. um Everybody always believes that all those people are innocent. In Marnie's case, the majority of people always say guilty. Anytime that her case has been covered by an alleged news outlet or whatever, is always saying Marnie is guilty. And I went and read the comments on one of them, and I laugh at the people saying, when, the headline saying expert says 5 foot Yang could not have shot 5'9" Ronnie Ryder, they're like, she was wearing heels. 9-inch heels? She's 5', 5'9". The person has to be at least as tall as Ronnie to be able to shoot her here going down. Marnie was not wearing 9-inch heels to go shoot somebody. Be real. So we had Art Borchers on the stand for most of the first day to talk about the bullet trajectory. And like I said, when you read my complete recap, you can get all the details on that. You can go on freemarniyang.com and you go into the experts tab, and you can see who, Art Borchers is, and, what his resume is. And I really did not like that the state was trying to demean Art Borchers because he was a police officer in Oak Park, Illinois. And so the state kept saying that that's an affluent community and it is the home of Frank Lloyd Wright, Ernest Hemingway, Betty White. And so was just trying to make it out like, so you were a cop at this rich place, and, no murders have ever happened there. That's what the state is like alluding to. That's not actually true, but that's what they're trying to do is, so how are you an expert on murder cases, because what murders are happening to Betty White's hometown? So I was disgusted by him trying to demean Oak Park, Illinois, and Art Borchers' history of being a police officer for the Oak Park Police Department. So bone of contention between Art Borchers and the state is, you know, in these cases, there's all this evidence, and so the people who were your trial attorneys, both on the state side and the defense, side, are not all the same people that are involved when now you're trying to overturn this wrongful conviction. And all the evidence is supposed to go to the current defense team. And one day, Art Borchers came across that there were these rolls of film that the defense had never been given pictures from those rolls of film. And so Marni's team then was able to get these photographs. And in these photographs, you see the wall in Ronnie Ryder's kitchen, and you can see a spot on the wall. To Art Borchers, a forensic or a ballistic expert, to him that looked like a bullet strike. And but also what drew his attention is you see on the counter underneath there just a small little bunch of this white stuff, just really small, which to me looks like drywall dust. And from their experiments and looking into the evidence, when they put these rods into the dummy, that they also have lasers on them, and you have a laser that will go, show you that way, but then you also have a laser going this way because it's going to show you, where the gun was, and then where a bullet would possibly go. And so, and in doing the Borchers and Larson did not have access to Ronnie Ryder's condo. They obviously come on the case years. Marnie's already been convicted. So this is years later, and somebody else is living there. So they don't have access to the actual condo, but you have from the reports the size of her kitchen. So they used a tarp that they put down so they could get the feel of the size of that room. And to me, in my humble opinion, these are people doing their due diligence in searching this evidence and trying to figure out what happened. So then when you see these pictures that you didn't previously have, and you see this dust over there, and then you see that there's this mark on the wall, they're like, our Borchers is saying it's a bullet strike. So this is the first shot, this shot B that went through her downward, out into her arm, out the other side of her arm. Then it went and hit the wall, and then rebounded from the wall, and it eventually lands on the mat in front of the kitchen sink. Now, this is not a big kitchen. This kitchen is, I want to say they said the kitchen was like 7 feet by 9 feet. So it's a very tiny area. So, it's not saying a bullet traveled 20 feet and then bound, this is a teeny tiny little area. So, and the thing that they, the state really wanted to argue about, they're in my view, they're playing semantics with saying that the state did not give them that, or that these canisters, this undeveloped film. And so what the state was presenting today, or is, is they're saying they have proof that these rolls of film had been developed back then. And that's fine. Get it. You develop them. But Marnie's team never had the pictures that you said was developed back then. Never got turned over to the team. And upon looking at things, Borchers was able to see that there's these rolls of film. So when you look at 35 millimeter film, if you're old enough to remember what those little rolls of film are, you don't know if the stuff's been developed or not until you've opened it. But if you open it, you ruin whatever the pictures are. So you say potato, I say potato, semantics, whatever. Um, so the pictures were developed. I don't give a shit. What was on those pictures that the defense didn't have is this dust. So they they kept arguing a lot about, is this dust? Is this not? It could be anything. Blah blah blah. Um. So Art, and then they crossed him. Um. I have to say, okay. Um. And it'll be in my recap. The state kept asking really ridiculous things of Art when he was on the stand, like, what was the killer thinking? I mean, just these really stupid things. And Art said to him at one point, oh, because this is what they were saying. There's one shell casing that's missing. It's never been recovered. And so there were 7 cases found, but 1 missing. So 8 shots. Okay. So so the state's like, that could have gone anywhere. Um it could have been uh kicked out the door and gone down the hallway and into the lobby. And so then Art said, and then the sky is green too. I thought that was funny. And actually, I told Art after that too. Is he had a couple of good singers in there, but but the state was talking to him like he's an idiot, and so whatever. Um, so okay, so we've got all the Art thing. Then then we went on a break, and then we came back, and we saw a diagram of the kitchen and talking more about the uh, bullet landing on the mat by the sink and hitting the wall. Da, 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 da. Okay, 8 shots and 5 live rounds. Um, and here's the state saying, and first responders could have disturbed the evidence, and that's why 1 case is missing and could have gone down the stairs. Saying, so he's saying it again. Oh, and then he said it could have gone down the kitchen drain. And so he's saying to Art, couldn't it have gone in the kitchen drain? And then Art's like, well, I don't know. They didn't take well, first Art saying, well, it would have still been in the drain. That you get that little loop, that little catch-all thing first. But Art's like, I don't know. They didn't take pictures of it. So it's like, well, why is the state saying things that is pointing out that, your first responders and stuff are idiots and could have kicked there's 1 bullet casing that's missing and they could have done something with it. And something that wasn't talked about in here that I can tell you, and I don't remember exactly the whole thing, but there was a set of keys that were found between the victim's legs. Jesus, that scared me from my phone vibrating at me. Um, it was one of the first responders' keys. that dropped their keys in the middle of the victim laying on the ground in her blood. Yeah, stellar job by Lake County. Um, so Art had said it's highly unlikely it would go down the drain. Um, and then the state's like, it could have gone under the fridge. And then Art's like, the police removed the fridge. Um, and then Art said Manny Montez doesn't have the certification uh, to be a forensic pathologist and hasn't completed the training. Um, so, um, I just, yeah, Montez. Paul Kaluzinski could tell you a million things about Montez. Montez isn't even in the state anymore, correct? Much like Sean Gale, he got the hell out of here. Um, Montez said, dark shadow on the wall. Okay, so then we went on lunch recess. We come back to they're looking at the pictures again of the dots on the wall and the debris pile, talking about that. And then the state kept trying to get Art to say if the shooter was left or right-handed. And Art's like, I don't know if they were left or right-handed. And so then when the state was done and Jed was back, Jed said the left or right hand thing is a red herring. Um, um, John Larson was brought up, and Jed mentioned, because John Larson, it was Art Borchers works for John Larson, and you can go on freemarniyang.com and you can find out who John Larson is, former FBI agent, police officer, all of his accolades. But so, and that was the thing, that John Larson was the one that was originally testifying for Marni's case. But John is now ill. So he has actually closed his forensics company that Art Borchers worked for him. And so that's why there's been a change in affidavit, because now, due to John Larson's illness, he cannot testify. And so now you need Art Borchers to testify. So you're not going to have Art Borchers testify with John Larson's affidavit. You need Art Borchers' affidavit. And Art is doing his due diligence and going over everything, and by looking at things at a different way, you see things that you might want to make slight changes. So Jed then went over some of the homicides that have occurred in Oak Park to clean up from the state trying to act like no homicides ever happened in Oak Park. It's in my note here. I'm not putting it in my recap, but it's in my note here, right here at this point. So Marni is in the courtroom, and she's not even supposed to turn around and look at us. She's got to kind of, she would do like a side eye to try and, make eye contact with their family. But so there is two officers who have to watch her in the courtroom. Well, and there were two officers in there for a while, or deputies, whatever you call them, and then one of them left, and then it was just one. So, but when there was the two guys sitting there, and I'm sitting in the, it was just me and Marni's father, Larry, and then on the first 2 days, Marni's daughter Emily was there, and today Emily's our twin brother was there with his fiance. But So both cops are sitting in front of me. I'm in the, there's a little half wall. They're on the other side of the wall. But at this point, both of them were going to sleep, and that's in my notes. Um, so Jed talks about several times, because the state and the state's expert, who will get to the state's expert, um, kept trying to say, you don't know for sure, blah blah blah, on how Ronnie Ryder was standing, or if she was standing, whatever. But it's, if you look at, or if you've seen the photos, the crime scene photos. Jesus Christ, my phone scares me because it's still on silent from court, and when it vibrates, it's scaring me. That's a scary. Um. Anyway, sorry, squirrel. Her, which, something I need to point out, and I've done it in past videos, because something that covered Marnie's case that was completely wrong. And one of the things they're trying to do in there is, oh, Ronnie was cradling her belly, trying to protect her unborn child. And when they did the recreation, you have Ronnie on her back and her hands around her belly. And I am not attacking the victim at all. Please do not think that I am doing that in any way, shape, or form. But I have seen the crime scene photos, and Ronnie was laying on her front. And in her right hands are her keys. So it would make sense if she's got keys in this hand. Okay. And she also had on her shoulder, she had a bag. Um, and then the left hand is empty, but near her hand, laying on the floor, is a Whole Foods bag, which had what um, is assumed is like her lunch, and in the bag that was on her shoulder, she had like gym shoes and stuff, looking like she was possibly like going to the gym or something. Don't know. But so while it is still an assumption, but it is assumed, since she is found with her car keys in her hand, she is holding her keys, bag on one shoulder, and a bag near her left hand, that she would have opened the door with her left hand. And they wanted to argue a lot about that. I don't know. So uh Jed says again, science shows that the shooter could not have been 5 foot tall Marni Yang. When the Jed is done at 2:29 p.m., we then go to the state, and the state says there was hair on the bullet that was on the mat. And then he's doing the, this is the same evidence, but they are changing their opinion. Yet they don't change that the shooter had to have been 5'10". Um, the state was not happy about Dr. Cyril Wecht being an expert in this case, because Cyril Wecht is now deceased, and they are not able to cross-examine him. They did not want Wecht stuff brought in at all, but the judge says he would allow it. And the state says, well, regardless, it's not new evidence. We then go on a 10-minute break. And then when we come back, we watch a video that Cyril Wecht did, where he gives his findings in this case. You can go to, as I've already said, you can go to Free Marni Yang to go see a video by Cyril Wecht, and also to learn more about that amazing man and what he did over his career. He had done, at the time that that video had been made, over 21,000 autopsies since he began in 1957. Some of the famous cases he was part of was JFK, RFK, MLK. One of the things which makes this new evidence that he states by looking at the photographs and stuff that Dr. Montez has, is that Ronnie Ryder had a black eye and some bruising on her face and on her lip. And Montez had just assumes that that came from the shooting. It is Dr. Cyril Wecht, who is board certified, unlike Montez, who said that those bruises had to have occurred days previously and that these were not fresh injuries. The other thing Dr. Wecht said is the evidence shows that the victim was standing when she was first shot into the chest. He agreed that the shooter has to be 5 foot 10 inches or taller. And he said there is no physical way possible for Marni Yang to have been the shooter. And then we hear that Marni Yang's DNA is not on the casings or the live rounds or the doorknob. Next thing that we see is the Stephen Wade video. Stephen Wade says he was told to shut up. Has never talked about this, and it wasn't until Steve Lapino found him and asked him about that day did he talk about it for the first time. He said nobody had ever reached out to him ever to talk about this case prior to Steve Lapino. What can I say about Steve Lapino? You can go on Free Marni Yang and you can watch a video with Steve Lapino. He, like Cyril Wecht, has sadly passed away. Now, Steve Lapino is somebody I knew personally as he was the investigator in this case. Nobody knows this case like Steve Lapino. He put everything into this case. He was a very good man, and he, like there's nothing in it for either one of us to defend Marni's innocence. We go where the facts take you, and facts and science show that Marni Yang is innocent. And it is the thousands of man hours that Steve Lapino put into this case that has brought it to where it is today. And it is so sad that Steve is not here to finish what he started. And the state tried to make it out like the defense team is just looking for anybody to be able to help their case. So find anybody possible to say something that's going to help. But no, Stephen Wade was found due to Steve Lapino's investigation into this case, turning over every rock. Steve Lapino, literally at Lake Forest, where the Bears practice or whatever, they had a picture of Steve Lapino there telling Bears players, do not talk to this man. Because Steve went everywhere and talked to anyone that could possibly be affiliated with this case. He followed every lead. And that's what an investigator should do. The state may want to make it out like The Borchers Larson report is, oh, they're saying that the shooter had to be taller, so now they're going to make the evidence fit. That's not what any expert involved on Marni Yang's defense team has done. They are following where the facts and science take them, period. So Steve Lupino went to that barbershop multiple times, talked to tons of different people. And so he is who found Stephen Wade. And so Stephen Wade said, you don't talk about this stuff. Not my business. So and nobody's asking him. But now Steve Lupino finds him, and so now he talked about it. And um I have it in the thing that I'm writing up and the thing I say on the case all the time. Oh, and there's somebody else involved in the case and asking if I can, texting me asking if I can talk, but no, I cannot. Um, the state said they found it odd that Stephen Wade remembered so many details, but he's like, well, I remember it because it was a strange day and I lived it. And I say that in the Stephen Avery case all the time because Stephen's story never changes. Why? Because he lived it. It's what happened. So you can remember that because it happened. But if you tell a lie and stories change and now you forget what you had said there, so how do I make this fit and do that in XYZ? That's why things change. So Stephen Wade, Sean Gale was a god, like I said. And so Sean Gale regularly going into that barbershop and being a nice looking man who dressed nice and looked nice, and he came in and he was all fidgety and he was sweaty, and he usually came in the afternoon. He was a party guy, through lots of parties, you know so he would come in later in the day, not early in the morning. So for him to come in early and all, and then it was a big story here that Sean Gale's girlfriend was murdered, as was their unborn child. So you're going to remember that you saw Sean Gale that day and what happened that day. So, not that hard to remember that. So, um, Stephen Ward had a couple different meetings with um, Steve Lupino, and then there was somebody else that he talked to. Um, Whatever. Um, I'm trying to find because it's going over the Stephen Ward stuff that I already talked about. She's gone, blah blah blah, all that stuff. Um, wasn't contacted about it. Da, 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 da. All right, so you'll have to read my recap where I talk about a person um, that used to be involved in Marnie's defense, and they're a horrible person. And they had contact with Stephen Wade. And we will get into that in a little bit. But I'm trying to go over these pages as they go. And like I said, you'll have to read my recap. So I'm not even going to talk anymore on that for right now. So, all right. So that was that was day one. Um, oh, did I mention they did test Sean Gale for gunshot residue on his hands, and the officer who did that noted that the back of both of Sean Gale's hands were all what does it say? I want to find the words that they used. abrasions. So that also would fit with that Ronnie Ryder, according to board certified famous pathologist Dr. Cyril Wecht, that she had a black eye, bruises on her face, and a hurt lip. Um, One would say that could have come from somebody punching her in the face. And then her baby daddy, Sean Gale, has abrasions on the back of both hands. Sean Gale, who previously forced her into having two abortions because he did not want to have a child. Um, so put those pieces together. Also know that um, for the couple of days prior to her murder, Ronnie called in sick and did not go to work. So is that because she didn't want people to see her black eye? Um, so day two. Um, the judge again is talking about they're only to address the five things, and Jed Jed Stone, Marnie's attorney, asked if Art Borchers could be allowed to stay in the courtroom and sit at his table because now the state was going to bring their ballistics expert in who would be saying things about um, Art's testimony. And, so could he wanted to use Art as expert in helping him on any of the things that the state's expert was going to say, and that Art wasn't going to be called again, recalled, that he was done testifying. So the judge let Art stay there. Um, so now we come to the state's expert. You'll even be able to see in my notes. Oh, I didn't like this guy. This guy was extremely cocky. But so this guy is said he's self-employed. He's been a forensic consultant since 1995 ish. That he's been doing it for in total since 1986 ish. Um, which I have written down because the state really pushed Art for, wanting to know how many cases have you done, how many this, that, and the other. But now when the state, it's like, I don't know, and um, he has, uh, he says he has no idea how many cases he's done, that he's done them in multiple states, but he can't remember what states they are. Um, he said that he has only reviewed the Larson report, and by looking at the Larson report, he does not think the height of the shooter can be determined. And he said that Larson and Borchers did not consider the the movement or what a body does after it's hit. And so now we get to where I haven't typed it up yet, the 6 through 13 pages. But what's on top of this page is assumptions, static, because these are the two words that the defense kept using. And so they're saying that Borchers and Larson assumed that the body was standing still when the bullet was shot into the chest and going down slightly and in and out of the arm. Um, um, Jed kept objecting, and the judge was telling the state to reword it. And then their expert said that their testing was done horizontally, and that if a body crouched down and forward because they were afraid, and I think I covered some of this stuff already, sorry. Um, and and then both the state and the expert were making fun of Borchers and Larson using a foam mannequin. And the dude was saying that he's never seen a foam mannequin being used, and that there's real ones that you can get that you can move in position that would have been more professional, that theirs doesn't move like a body. And Jed objected because over and over again, their expert kept saying horizontal, not vertical. And the expert was bothered by one of the pictures of Art Borcher's wife, who is similar to Marnie's height. And she was holding a gun, showing that you would have had to have shot like this, over your head, and the bull, the gun down this way. Um, and talking about this was an assumption and there was an objection and ask another way. Um, and the expert says you have to break everything down and not hone in on one theory. And he said Borchers and Larson didn't test different theories. Um, then the expert was saying things that he said were in the report, and Jed said objected to that because those weren't what wasn't what was said in the report. So then the guy asked if he could see the report so he could use uh, Art's words and not his own. And Jed said, but you would need to read the entire sentence and not what you cherry pick, because what it says is they could have used a two-handed grip. However, there is an exception based on the evidence from the medical examiner. And the judge said context is king. And then there was an objection because the report doesn't say it's a two-handed grip, and the judge said that Jed could address that on cross. So the state had no further questions. So we went on lunch break at 11:50, and we came back at 1 o'clock. And now Jed um, chats with their expert. Um, and Jed said that their expert agreed with Art that you need to take a complex event and make smaller segments to examine each part. And the guide said yes. And um, Jed asked if he was shown a picture of the laser in shot B and it going backwards. And he asked, is it your testimony that the photo is inaccurate? Well, the guy doesn't know because he didn't read the law enforcement reports. Then Jed asked him, did he read the autopsy? And the guy says he doesn't recall. He was asked, did he watch any of the videos? He doesn't know. Did you look at all the pictures? He said he viewed all the pictures that were sent to him. But he doesn't know if all pictures were sent to him. He just looked at um, um, he asked them to send him what was needed. And the expert said it is not uncommon to be provided only photos they want me to see. And they asked him to look at Art's report, and if 5 feet is the only answer. And now I've got this section marked because now this is something too that I told Jed about today that I knew was in my notes. And while we were on a break, I then had to find it and mark it because I wanted to make sure that Jed had this for in his closing. So Jed then asked the expert if he knew who Cyril Wecht is. And the guy said, yes, he's one of America's best. So I just found that important. That even their own expert is saying that the expert that is on Team Yang, who said there's no possible way that Marni Yang was the shooter, their own expert said, because I wrote it down exactly and now I have it marked in here, one of America's best. So, all right. So he says he knows who Dr. Cyril Wecht is. So he asked if he looked at Cyril Wecht's report or his video. And expert says he does believe he got a very brief report from him, but doesn't recall for sure. And so then Jed took issue with him calling it brief because it's 10 pages long. But so Jed then showed him the 10-page report. And the dude says he doesn't believe he's seen it. But then the guy's got to get a little dig in, and he says, but 10 pages are standard as opposed to 111, because Art Borcher's latest report was 111 pages long. So Jed then reads Dr. Wecht's report on Shot B. And the expert says, well, I didn't see that, and I'm not a pathologist. Jed said that Dr. Wecht said this was consistent with the victim was standing. And their expert says, well, they wouldn't comment on that because they're not a pathologist. And now he goes back into the foam mannequin, and their expert says he's never seen anything like that dummy. And Jed says, well, just because you've never seen that dummy doesn't mean it's never been used by others. And their expert said, well, if that's the best they can do, then so be it. And Jed said it's just a visual aid. And now the expert says, well, when you put it like that, then my opinion changes. So on to the photo of debris. The expert says that he can't tell what that debris is. Jed asked him if he uses all the facts of a crime scene. And did he know that Ronnie Ryder was holding keys in her right hand? And the expert had said he recalls seeing a picture of her. Jed asked, do you recall a strap of her bag being on her right shoulder? And he said, yes. Jed said her left hand was empty, but the Whole Foods bag was near it with her lunch in there. And expert says he has no idea what was in the bag. And then he said if he was hired like Art Borchers was, he would have considered all the evidence. But that was not his purpose. He was just hired to look at Art's report. And then he said that Borchers and Larson's did a great job to support their theory. Then Jed said again, Dr. Wecht said that she was standing when that B shot happened. And the expert, well, I didn't see that. And the state objects, saying, not sure what you're doing, that the expert never saw the Cyril Wecht report. Then Jed asked the expert if he was saying that Larson and Borchers made it up. And the guy does not think they're making it up. And Jed asked, "Do you believe, based on your analysis, that B is a close shot?" And um, they had to have been around 3 inches away. And then the expert says, "Well, I haven't seen the clothing." But he did admit there's a 3 inch rule when it comes to gunshot residue. And then the state objects. Um, and the judge overrules. So the expert says he has no reason to debate the gunshot residue and the 3 inches, but he said he would have liked to have seen the body moved into different positions. And then Jed said, their expert hasn't seen things. He only looked at what he was asked to. He hasn't read anything, and he's here to tell the judge that he shouldn't believe Art Borchers, John Larson, or Cyril Wecht. But those three looked at lots of different evidence to base their opinions on. Jed said, unlike the Lake County coroner at the time, or pathologist, Cyril Wecht is board certified. And he said that the state's expert was really more like a hitman. Whoa, that caused an objection. So Jed asked the expert if he read the Art's report of shot B, and the expert said he wouldn't give his opinion based only on a picture. He says it's a long shot at best to call that mark on the wall a bullet strike. Why does this person, it's my work that just keeps emailing. So Jed asked, what evidence do you have that the victim was on the ground? What evidence do you have that she was kneeling or bent? The expert says, none. I wasn't hired for that. And then you'll see in my notes, and I have it circled, I wrote the word jagoff. Guy really bothered me. The guy said he doesn't think that Art and John broke it down as much as they should have. He doesn't see that they did anything with a bent body. And I have noted here, he kept calling Jed Jed. When you're a paid expert, I'm sure this is not the first time this guy has testified as a ballistics expert. You don't call the attorney by his first name. He is Mr. Stone. And so by continually calling him Jed, you're intentionally trying to be disrespectful and a douche. So that's why it's in my notes. Jed asked him what evidence does he have that the shooter was a 5 foot tall woman. The expert says he doesn't. And Jed said he has nothing else at 1:42 p.m. So on the redirect, the expert says that there was nothing in the Larson Borchers report but their cardboard and foam, and that it was insufficient evidence for a hypothesis. And that was the end of that guy. Then at 1:45 p.m., state calls their next witness. He is a sergeant at the Vernon Hills Police Department. He's been there 28 years. He works on the night shift. When this murder occurred, he was a plainclothes tactical investigator for the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force. And he says they handled homicides and heinous crimes. He had been doing it for about 6 months at that time. he talked to Jesse Delgado in his police car outside of his house on January 7th, 2008. That there's a mistake in his report. You know, it was January 7th, and so he had ma- written 2007, that it was now 2008. Who cares? Um, um, I'm trying to figure out what my notes are saying here. I'm trying, because it says, I don't recall asking about murder weapon saw at Marnie's. Okay. Well, so um, Jesse was a friend of Andrew's. He's been in the house. Um, he told the cop that he did not know Marnie to own a gun. He knew her boyfriend Sal had one. Sal had been a cop. Um, the state asked the officer, did Jesse ever tell you he stole a gun or removed one? The cop said no. Um, the state asked, would that be significant if he had? And the cop said yes. And then the state said nothing further. Then it was Jed's turn, and he asked the cop if he's interviewed many people, and he said yes. And then Jed asked, do they lie to the police? And he said yes. And then Jed said, if he stole the gun, do you think they might not want to tell you that? And the cop said, that's possible. And so Jed said, you're not saying he didn't steal it. And the cop said, all I can say is what he told me. And then that cop was done. 1:53 p.m. Then another officer takes the stand. He's been with Grays Lake since 2016. In 2022, he was on patrol, and he arrested Stephen Wade for a stolen vehicle. And Stephen Wade, upon that arrest, had given his brother's name, blah, blah, blah. A woman was also in the car who described herself, according to him, as a prostitute. Um, um, the guy had told the cop that Jed Stone was his attorney. And that was the end of the state questioning. Now, Jed said, um, was there any evidence that I represented Stephen Wade? And the cop said, no, that's just what he said. And um, Jed said, well, he told you he was someone else. And then he said I was his lawyer. And so that was the end of that guy at 2:03. The state had no further witnesses. They said they had a bunch of documents to admit. So there were photos, lab reports, affidavits, um, uh, something on Stephen Wade obstructing justice, his conviction of possession. There were 5 transcripts of Marnie's trial from 2011. Jed Stone said, I don't have them, and I don't know what the relevance of them, and that he needs to review them. Um, the state said they will email them to Jed tonight, and he could discuss them tomorrow. Um, the state also wanted to submit something on Jesse Delgado had been convicted of something, and then they wanted to play for us a bunch of jail calls. And so these are Stephen Wade's jail calls. There's 14 calls in total. And for me to summarize those calls, because I've been on here, oh my God, really? An hour and a half. Um, this is involving that person who used to be affiliated with this case. And so what it comes down to is when Stephen Wade got arrested, he then reached out to this person and asked for help. And this person claimed that they could help him. And then this guy said he's hungry. Could they put money on his books? And this person gave them money. Um, it'll be in my written recap, um, more on that and how horrible that person is. And I'm not going to get into that now because I want to get done with this. I also have a meeting I have to be at in an hour and a half. Okay, so we're not going to get into those calls and that stupid person. Um, oh, and then there was a then the state drops on them that they have pictures that they want to submit. Too. I'm trying to find where that is because right now my notes are still talking about those jail calls. Um, 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 so the judge first said to Jed that, since these are like crime scene photos and evidence and stuff, they didn't want Jed to take those photos out of the courtroom and asked if he would look at them in court. Um, so Jed looked through those photos pretty fast. Uh, um, Jed says he resents getting those photos now. Um, and some of the stuff in those photos are things that are have been ruled that they can't discuss. And so there's things in those photos like the Shell gas station camera where the state had claimed, oh, this is Marni Yang's car going past. Um, so like that's in there, but the defense also there's evidence and proof that that's not Marni's car, and Jed would love to debate that, but it's not. It's been ruled against. But now here's the state with these pictures that would be talking about the Shell camera. Um, and the judge says he's not sure why the state would tender these photos now. And then he again reiterates 5 things advance this to the stage 3, and those are the only things to be ruled upon. And he hopes no one from the state is going to argue beyond those 5 things. The judge was not happy with the state, and that's how we ended day 2. So then we go into day 3 today, 9:14 a.m. I missed the very beginning. I was late due to weather. It was snowing here, and I have to drive all the way to Marnie's dad's house to pick him up first. And so that's about an hour drive for me. And then from Larry's house to the courthouse is another half hour. But due to how bad it was snowing, it took me over 2 hours to, yeah. So we got court was supposed to start at 9 a.m. and we walked in at 9:14 a.m. into the courtroom. Judd was talking when we walked in, and he was talking about how Marnie was trying to protect her son from being arrested, and he was talking about the science of false confessions and the way police can force you into a false confession by leaking information, and then saying only a guilty person would know this information. Um, I mean, all the other cases I'm on, you you know, think of Brendan Dassey, where they had all the pictures. I mean, and they've done that with Marni Yang too. Um, all the pictures are out on the table of all this evidence. I mean, whatever. Um, Judge again talks about only the 5 items, and um, and since I missed whatever was at the beginning, I'm not sure what this is pertaining to, but Jed would like to submit Thompson's, one of the people from Marnie's team, Thompson's report as a rebuttal to whatever they're talking about, um, because that's an expert on false confessions. Um, And Jed was upset about getting emails from the state at like 9:30 last night. Um, the state claimed that the exhibit list was tendered in July. Um, and then it goes into those, the pictures have been developed, blah, blah, blah. We've already discussed that, and I'm not going to get into it again. Um, and then talking about that stupid person with the case who put money on Stephen Wade's commissary. Um, it sounds like my husband's home. Um, oh, then talking about Stephen Wade being arrested and so like wanting to say something about his credibility. Um, Jed again talking about wanting Thompson, he, expert in the interrogation technique. Um, the judge didn't know how that was relevant to the five things, and Jed said, "Well, the state is trying to use something about that now." Um, and the state said they don't understand that argument. Um, the state said it's trial evidence. Um, Jed brings up the uh, this is what the defendant said in a recorded tape at Denny's. He was reading a transcript that from one of the things that the state had submitted. Um, the judge said nothing is advanced to this stage about the confession. And if Jed is not successful with this stage 3 hearing getting a new trial, he could use that whole thing on review. The state said they just wanted to show proof that the pictures had been developed. Jed said they paid, Jed's team paid $203.69 on November 29th, 2019 to get those pictures printed. So that's when the defense got those pictures and that they were developed. Um, okay, so now we get in. Jed is giving his closing. He says they are obligated to present new evidence that probably would change the verdict in a retrial, and that they are asking the judge to send Marni Yang back to a jury with the evidence that they have shown that were not part of the original trial. Jed thinks that the defense has met that burden of new evidence that would get a new trial. He thinks the photographs and forensics of that shot B undermines the original jury's verdict, and the bullet could not have been shot by someone 5 feet tall into somebody who is 5'9". And he said, we know by a forensic and medical certainty where the bullet began and where it ended. It entered her chest, and the rods used to show it went slightly downward angle from front to back. Used a laser to reverse where it began. The gun had to have been 3 to 6 inches from the clothing. This is all new evidence. It struck a wall that created debris and landed on the ground. It is evidence of actual innocence that requires a new trial, so it can be submitted. He doesn't have to show that it will change the verdict, only that it could. We have Stephen Wade hearing that Sean Gale said, I did it, she's gone. Jed points a finger at Sean Gale being involved in the death of Ronnie Ryder. Art Borchers listed everything he saw and had an index at the end of the 111-page report. Weck looked at that report. The state's expert said he only looked at what the state gave him. You can't render an opinion on evidence that only that expert was given. You need more. Dr. Wecht discovered the black eye. The state again objects to anything about Dr. Wecht. The GSR. Kathy's from Marni is now saying, "Are you with media? I don't want to call you." Um, 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 Sorry, squirrel, where was I? There was an objection. Um, Jed said the marks on her face could only be from someone hitting her, and that we believe that she was a victim of domestic violence. There was Sean Gale's statement to the police when she died out of nowhere. He said, "Was she found in a pool of blood? I did it. She's gone." Only someone who was there would know that. So the state says Wade has a criminal history. Jed says we don't choose our witnesses. The facts do. We know Leroy pulled Sean Gale into his office and says he needs to get his shit together. He came in disheveled and sweaty when usually well groomed. Leroy shut the shop down and ordered everyone to leave. Jed found it almost incredible that their expert would come to court not knowing what they saw and what they didn't. Jed was done at 10:18 a.m. We went on recess till 11. And then that's when the state got their closing. State said there's a standard for newly discovered evidence that is due diligence, that no reasonable fact finder, no jury would find innocent on new evidence. And he's talking about the undeveloped film, wanting to argue about that again, where he's like, they were developed and they were on record and some were at the trial. Oh, and then he wants to comment on Art Borchers saying the pictures were never given to the trial team. Again, we're talking semantics. And Art said this on the stand too when this was brought up, that Art meant the team that he's a part of. He, not Marnie's original trial team. But that's how you're going to try and say that, oh, look, Art's changing what he's saying now and blah, blah. No, Art, it's obvious he always meant the team that he's a part of, that those photos were not given to him, and that's factual. They were not given to them, and that they got them developed themselves. Um, 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 um. So, state says their opinions are not newly discovered evidence. He said the DNA on the. I found this interesting. Um, and it just goes into crappy work by them. So he says, Jeff, can you listen to me talking about this too? Because maybe I want to ask you on this because it's about guns. Um, okay, so this is about the DNA that was on the live round. And so he said that they tested for DNA on those live rounds in 2007. The defense didn't swab them until well after the trial. But they originally had swabbed those live rounds because after they swabbed the live rounds for the DNA on there, the further testing they were going to do on those live rounds, that they were now going to like shoot them and touch them, and so that any DNA on them would be lost. So they had to swab the DNA off the live rounds first, and that then they could only, and this is one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Jeff, because the state said that they could only touch the live rounds with their bare hands, that they can't use gloves.
Yeah, they're idiots.
Okay. Because I didn't understand that, saying they, so they're saying now, because the um defense didn't get these live rounds until after the state and their experts had done whatever. Now the DNA that the defense is finding on them is because their people could not use gloves in holding those bullets. So the DNA would be their experts' DNA on them.
They're talking about the misfires that were picked
Yeah.
up off the floor.
Yeah.
Why couldn't they pick them up with gloves?
Well, they said in their testing they had to.
Testing for what?
I don't know what testing they were doing, but they were shooting them. They actually then fired those live rounds.
For what purpose?
I don't know. They never said, explain what the purpose would be on
Then
why
it
they
would only
fired them.
make sense if they had the gun to test ballistics off the barrel.
Okay.
There's no reason to be firing the rounds that were on the floor.
Okay. Well, yeah. So they said, so in whatever they were doing with it, because they were firing it, so they took all the DNA off of it first, and then they like fired it and had to touch it and couldn't use gloves.
That,
And so it's their DNA that's
the
on
only
those,
reason they
on that
would,
evidence now.
the only thing they would ever do to those rounds would be to disassemble them to check the metallurgy on the actual bullet to verify that the bullets on the floor were the same bullets that were used on her. There's no reason to fire it ever. The only reason they would ever fire anything would be to check ballistics off the barrel if they had the gun.
Now to take, so okay, say they didn't fire it ever, and they were just taking it apart. Could you wear gloves to take it apart?
Yes.
Okay, well, because
You watch me do that at the clubhouse.
states said you cannot use gloves.
The reason you can't. That's the stupidest statement ever.
Okay, so that's my husband talking behind.
Gloves to pick them up. You can use guns to load the magazine. You can use guns to do whatever, or gloves to do whatever. There's no reason you couldn't use gloves.
So, my husband, the gun enthusiast, knows like everything there is to know about guns. So that's why, yeah, I wanted, because I found that very odd that he said that they could not wear gloves. So, all right, thank you for that, Jeff. Um, so then he talked about the bracelet, said that was tested years later after being dug up from the ground. It didn't have Ronnie's DNA on it. Um, he said the defense said the police fabricated this bracelet. Um, then he said Delgado is a family friend that said he stole the gun. And so the state's trying to claim that Jesse Delgado is only saying this to try and free Marni. Yeah, that's not happening. And he said, and they didn't bring Jesse Delgado in to testify. So he says it's a baseless claim by a family friend to try to get a new trial. Then he said Wade comes out of the woodwork with a weird story. That's what he said. He said that's not newly discovered evidence. And then Stephen Wade shows up and then wants to talk about a warrant for Stephen Wade, all that stuff. And telling that Jed was his lawyer. And he just says, so Stephen Wade just seems to lie. And then he's like, and the defense didn't call him as a witness. Um, Talking about that stupid person from the case and their phone calls with Stephen Wade and putting money on his commissary. Um, he said that Stephen Wade has been bought and paid for. Then in talking about Dr. Wecht, he said the only report they gave him is their first report. He's an expert relying on trial evidence, so therefore it's not new evidence. And then he said that Wecht is dead and can't be cross examined. Um, he made fun of the defense for not getting a new pathologist since Cyril Wecht died. He says that Marni Yang's experts have changed their opinion more times than the wind changes directions. Um, he says they rely exclusively on Montez's report in 2019. Then in 2021, Borchers writes a report on previous available evidence. The state said that their expert was the only truth teller. Um, you can't say that's a bullet strike, and he thinks that art is ridiculous to say it with a straight face. Um, State said that foam dummy is as ridiculous as it sounds. That the only accurate call in the case is that it cannot be determined, and then said that our expert is the hitman. Um, he then said the motive is that Marni Ying was stalking her victim and brought up the Enterprise rental car, which again were things not supposed to be discussed here. Um, he said this was never a mystery, and then he points at Marni Yang and said that she is the killer. He ends at 11:42 a.m. Jed gets to rebut and says Marni should get a new trial. He said that we aren't running away from opinions. We know where this started. Someone who was taller than 5 foot, that had to be at least 5'9", shot Ronnie Ryder. She had keys in her right hand, so she opened the door with her left. There was gunshot residue on her clothes that the jury had never been told about. Montez took a photo during the autopsy with a rod in the wound that went slightly downward angle and then in and out of her arm. The shooter's gun had to be 3 to 6 inches away from Ronnie. Montez's picture at autopsy did not have her arm up in the air, because that's been something the state tries to say that it went up. Um, um, there's a trace mark on the wall that created debris and the bullet bounced to the floor. That is new evidence. They are not relying on the Montez report. Dr. Wecht said the injuries were 2 to 4 days old, that she was in upright position when shot, and the person had to be taller than Ronnie Ryder. Marni could not have been the shooter. Jed said he did not have meeting after meeting with Stephen Wade. He met him once and took his statement. He said Borchers is not running away from his opinion. His analysis evolved as he saw more innocence in the case. Then Jed talked about the polio vaccine, how you improve on the method and you test a hypothesis. He said Wecht could have disagreed with the Borchers report. Borchers and John Larson are not a pathologist, and the state said that at a prior case, so that is why the defense got Dr. Wecht. Jed said nobody bought and paid Wade, and he resents the allegation. Jed said they had looked for a witness for years, and Steve Lapino found Stephen Wade. Steve Lapino knew there were other barbers. Wade said when Sean Gale came in, he was disheveled. Normally he came in the afternoon, said it's over, I killed her, she's dead. and that um, Leroy or Floyd, or it's Floyd's barber shop, but his name's Leroy, I think. I might be getting their names wrong on there. Um, but he said, "You got to get your shit together, man." Told the barbers, "Get out of here before the police come." Um, Dr. Weck disproved Montez that the face injuries were not from the shooting. The abrasions were 2 to 4 days old, and Sean Gale had abrasions on the back of both hands. Jed urges the state to investigate Sean Gale. Jed looks forward to a new trial, and Jed rested at 11:57 a.m. The judge set Friday, May 15th for the day that he will give his ruling. April 20th is going to be a status hearing to confirm that the May 15th date still works for everybody. And the judge approved for Marni Yang to be brought back up from the prison, and so that she would come back on the Thursday prior to the ruling. So she would be back on May 14th. And we ended at noon today. So that is that. And I'm going to end this live video because I've now been on for 2 hours. And I have a meeting to be at in an hour. I still didn't get done writing my whole recap, so I guess I'm going to have to finish that tomorrow because I'm not going to have time to do it today. But thank you, everybody who joined me for this, whether you were live or you're going to be watching it later. I will at some point download this video and upload it to the Justice with Jack's YouTube channel because Facebook now deletes live videos after 30 days. So you will be able to get it over there. If anything else comes out on Marnie's case or Melissa's case or Steven's case, I will post it here. Oh my gosh, I'm so tired now. All right, so thank you, everybody. I'm out. Investigation continues.